Okay. Yesterday, when we talked about the real benefit of college, we talked about the real benefit of college being that it's a place where you learn how to engage in leisure, which is to say, it's a place in which you learn how to perceive or to pursue the perception of the true, the good, and the beautiful, understanding the nature of things, and then therefore knowing how to act with virtue because you know how to act according to the nature of things. And so today we're going to talk about the good college student and the role that you all can play in helping to bring that about. And I don't have these books with me. I meant to bring them. I left them at home, so I don't have them to show you. But there are two books that I think you might find very interesting to encourage you along these lines. The first book, it's an older book, turn of the 19th to the 20th century timeframe, I believe, and it's by a French guy. His name is A.T. French names, so it's going to be hard. CiRCE. I'm going to put this in the chat though, so you all can see how to spell it, because converting a French name might have an S on the end. I can't remember. And his book is called The Intellectual Life. It's a really good book. And then there's another book by a guy named James Schall called The Life of the Mind. So The Intellectual Life and The Life of the Mind. And The Life of the Mind is a newer book, especially relative to the intellectual life, but he builds on a lot of the ideas in the intellectual life and kind of puts them in a setting for us, right? So both of those are really good books to help you think about these things. But here's my take on it. When we think about the world that we live in, the world was created by God, and God is Christ the Son, the Son of God is the Logos with a capital L, which is what John tells us in his gospel, the opening lines of his gospel. In the beginning was the Word, or the Logos, and the Logos was with God, and the Logos was God. Then the Logos, as the creator of the world, has created little logoi, to plural, logoses. And so everything that he created has itself its own logos, as images of the Logos. And then the humans among those, we also create, and the things that we create have a logos. So there's like the capital L logos, and then the little l logoi, and then these kind of sub logoi, to borrow from Tolkien, who I think is the lesser of the two authors on that poll. But to borrow from Tolkien, we're sub-creators, so we create these kind of sub-creations, these sub-logoi. Those are the man-made logoi. And if the pursuit of wisdom and virtue that we talked about yesterday is the perception, wisdom is perceiving the nature of something, which is to say, it's a way of perceiving the logos of a thing, or an understanding of the thing as it is. So everything has a logos, everything has a nature, and that's what we're trying to perceive. Because if we understand the thing, we have wisdom, and if we align our activities with that thing according to its nature, then we're virtuous. We're acting with virtue. So ultimately, the goal is to perceive Christ the Logos. That's what we want to do. When Christ comes, we want to be able to see him and recognize that he is he. We don't want to be perceived by, say, an antichrist, for example. We don't want to be deceived, rather, by an antichrist thinking he's the Logos when he's not. We want to be able to perceive Christ and see him as the Logos. Well, one of the ways that we can learn how to perceive the Logos with a capital L is by practicing how to perceive a little Logos. Perceiving the little logos in the things that are made. If I can understand the nature of this, I can learn how to see the nature of this, then I can learn how to see the nature of Christ. So we are practicing in perceiving the logos, but everything has a logos. The things that God has made, like dogs and trees, and the things that man have made, like books and paintings and musical scores and all of that stuff. Buildings, furniture, tools, all of that stuff. All of those things have natures. So as we are engaging in the college class, for example, our professors are asking us to read some book. Here, read this book, Matthew. And then I get this book and I read it, and then I'm, supposed to go to class and either participate in a conversation in a good school. I'm going to get to participate in a conversation. Some schools I may have to, you know, take what I've read from the book and then take what the professor is sharing and kind of make sense of those things. Probably going to have to write papers on it. Probably going to have to take a test maybe, or quizzes or something like that. But I'm going to have to engage with what I perceived in the book in these various ways, through conversations, through lectures, through tests, through papers, through quizzes, whatever. So what my role then should be, if I'm trying to practice leisure, learn how to engage in leisure and learn how to pursue wisdom and virtue, it's to take the book that I'm assigned and try to perceive the logos in it that was put there by the author and by the spirit within the author. So I'm looking at the book trying to understand, what is this book about, which can be very different than what we may feel, or we may have experienced as kind of the normal practice for a book. So in pursuing wisdom and virtue, the goal is to understand the logos of the book. But sometimes in education, it may feel like the purpose of reading the book is to be able to tell the teacher facts about the book. What was the name of the butcher's wife? What city was the dog found in? What color robe was the priest wearing? Whatever, right? There's this kind of like quiz answer kind of can I recall random facts? Which is not the same thing as perceiving the logos, but all of those things, I can know all of those things by having pursued the book to perceive the logos. So as I read the book trying to perceive the logos, what is this book really about? My favorite example, because it's one of the books I've read the most, is in Plato's Republic. Plato writes this book called The Republic, and the whole book is this extended conversation, like 10 hours long conversation about what is justice. And the approach that I take when I'm reading the book should be to figure out that is the question that's being answered, and what is being said to help me answer it. Like, is he giving me the answer to that question? It's Plato, so he's not. If it were Aristotle, he would be, but it's Plato, so he's not telling me the answer to the question, but he's telling me how to answer the question. He's giving me the logos that he's giving me as the means to attempt to answer the question, to participate in that struggle. Anyway, so that's the logos of that book from as I've perceived it. But because I know that, because I've read the book in that way, I know the name of the character that he's arguing with at the end of book one, or the answer or the objection that the first character in book two gives to his answer, the objection that the second character in book two gives to. Like, I know some of those kind of recall type facts because I've read it trying to perceive the logos. So the glorious thing is that if you're pursuing the book to try to understand the nature of it that the author has given to us in his created artifact, you can do all those other things. But if I only read the book to do all those other things, I'd miss out on this. I miss out on this opportunity to practice perceiving the nature of something, to pursuing wisdom and virtue, to practicing leisure. So while I might need to do those things for the sake of a test or a quiz or a paper or even the conversation, I want to be able to do those things. Again, if you can see my hand, there's two sides here, right? The recall of facts and information versus the perception of the logos, of the nature of the text. And then in doing that, when I enter into, especially if I'm in a situation in school where I get to have a conversation with my classmates and with my professor about the nature of the book, and about what's happening in the text, then what it allows me to do is it allows me to participate in that conversation, to point to things in the text that make me see or that are causing me to see what I'm seeing. It allows my students and my professor to share those things with me that they've seen, that they've perceived. It allows us to see, because if we can point to direct passages in the book that explain why we're seeing what we see, and they're pointing to direct passages that explain why they're seeing what they see. It allows us to correct each other if we disagree, right? There's ways for us to see, oh, I interpreted that in this way when I should have interpreted it in this way. It allows us to correct each other and learn how to read from each other. But it also allows us to make um, connections. And so there's this idea of the science of relations. It allows me to see relationships between the nature of this book and the nature of this other book, or the nature of this book and the nature of this thing that's happening in my life, this thing that's happening in my community, or whatever, right? So there's there's a way of making connections to help us to perceiving the nature of the book might help me through these relations perceive better the nature of this other thing, a book, a person, anything in the world around me, um, which then all participates in helping me to to pursue wisdom and to pursue virtue. So the wisdom and virtue then being about the perceiving of a nature and then the acting appropriately according to that nature comes from this logos perception that happens with that I get to practice when I'm reading something, or when I'm examining a painting, or when I'm listening to a piece of music. It also happens in math and science as well. Um, the uh, the perceiving the nature of a number, perceiving the nature of a frog, perceiving the nature of um, anything from math or science is there as well. So all of this is kind of happening, are ways of us learning to pursue wisdom and virtue in the classroom, ways in which our college experience can help us to pursue wisdom and virtue as the real benefit of college. But it's also something that we can bring to the experience ourselves, even when our professors may not always be doing that. There's ways for us to kind of bring it ourselves. Um, because the professor is going to play a role too in helping us to do this, um, in help, giving us the right artifacts and drawing out the right questions, but also kind of setting boundaries for us. But I won't go into that because that's going to be the role. That's going to be the talk for tomorrow. Like, what is the good professor, and what are those things that the professor is doing? So we'll go into that in more detail tomorrow. On that note, I just want to encourage you all to, um, maybe think about college in this way. Think about your education in this way as a means to pursuing wisdom and virtue, and to practicing leisure. And then, and then stop and hand it off to Dr. Bohr so she can tell you all about a school that does this and does it quite well, which is the Honors College at Belmont Abbey. So let me change the what do you call this? The spotlight thing over to her so you can see her except me. And there we go. Dr. Bohr, thank you for coming.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Bianco. So good to see you today. I'm reminded listening to that, um, why we in the Honors College are just such a big fan of you and of the CiRCE Institute. So much so that we, of course, just started that great partnership with you guys. So I'm just delighted to have this opportunity to fangirl a little bit, and also to piggyback on what you've said about liberal education. So I am as Dr. Bianco, and unfortunately punned, I'm Dr. Bohr, here, hopefully not to bore you, or to bore into your soul, but just to say a few words about what a good student is, especially built on my experience as a teacher in a particular program. I am an assistant professor in the Honors College here at Belmont Abbey. I've been here 5 or 6 years now. I think this is my 6th year here. And I came here to help launch this Honors College, which is a great books honors college attached to a small Benedictine monastery, attached to a small liberal arts school here, just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina. And we have about I think 1,600 students or so, roughly. I'm an alumna of Belmont Abbey College, and so after about a 7-year sojourn away from Belmont Abbey in secular academia, I managed to find my way back, and I'm grateful every day that I get to live here and to teach here and to be here. So just today, I mean, I am gonna talk a little bit about Belmont Abbey later on and just some of the practical things you might be wondering about. But I'd like to speak more generally to the question of what makes for a good student. Right? What is a good student? And um, you have a great resource in what Dr. Bianco's book is. My husband's favorite book is The Intellectual Life. So you've really spoken to me there. Right? Um, and then I'll turn to the particular. So, okay, what makes for a good student? And I guess I might, because I'm allowed to do this, rephrase the question a little bit. You know, what ought the student study, right? Because we can be good students of all kinds of things. We can be a student of music. We can be students of cooking. We can be students of carpentry. We can of any art we can study, right? We could be a student of sport in a way. And so it is possible to say to look at different characteristics and say something more general about what a good student is. The way I'd like to focus or refocus that question is, well, what makes a good student of liberal education? Right? What is a good student? Who is the good student of the liberal arts? And in order to think about that, we have to think about the goal or the purpose of what education is and what liberal education in particular is. What is the goal of an education that is supposed to liberate, right? That's the root of liberate, liberty, and liberal is the same root in Latin. So what is that freedom or liberation that this kind of education pursues in particular? And this is something I've been thinking about a lot lately in my daily work in the Honors College, because every now and then, once you pop up from the particular joys of teaching a particular work, like the Republic, which I also like very much. Um, every now and then you pop up and you have to think about, well, why am I doing what I'm doing? What am I doing? What justifies the work involved in pursuing this particular discipline, right? And so the phrase that I've come across lately in my thinking, that has really just come to me in thinking about what we do at a liberal arts school and in the community of the Honors College here at Belmont Abbey in particular, our goal is this. Our goal is to prepare nature for grace. That is our goal. It is to prepare nature for grace. And I'll just explain a little bit about what I mean by that, because it is very close to what Dr. Bianco just said about, tracing the logoi all around us in order to ultimately come to seek the face of Christ himself, who is the Logos, the Logo made flesh, who dwells among us, right? That is why we are here. So what does it mean to prepare nature for grace? So I had a student a couple of years ago who, after the first 2 years of the Honors College, experienced a serious conversion in his faith. He found that the books in the ancients and in the medieval Christian authors that we read here had just set him on fire for the truth. And at some point, he said to me, "Why do we even bother to read books other than Thomas Aquinas's Summa Theologiae? Why don't we just stick with that and forget the rest?" And he caught me a bit off guard, and I said something clumsy like, "Well, because because you don't have a nature." And he said, "What are you talking about?" And so after I was given a moment, I said, "Well, because Thomas Aquinas himself in the Summa says that grace perfects nature, right? It brings nature to completion or perfection. And yet, in the modern world, our nature is so wounded. It's not just wounded by original sin, it's wounded by a particular detachment from reality that comes from living in a hyper technological age, a hyper materialistic age, an age that separates us from just the experience of what is real, and what we really are. And if grace perfects nature, right, then we have to give grace something to work with, right? So to think about this a little bit more, if grace perfecting nature is what we aim to do here, well, can we say a little bit more about what nature is in order to understand what that means, right? Um, in order to think about what St. Thomas Aquinas meant when he said that grace perfects nature, we need to understand that Aquinas has a teacher, not a teacher he studied under in his physical life, but a teacher he learned from books, and that teacher's name was Aristotle. Aristotle is a philosopher I've from ancient Greece. Right? He's the student of Plato, Dr. Bianco's teacher, and Aristotle is my teacher. So in a way, I guess that makes you my intellectual grandfather, I think, of some sort, right? So Thomas Aquinas draws on Aristotle when he speaks about nature, right? Well, nature is one of the biggest words Aristotle uses. He uses it everywhere. It's so rich, and so I can't describe it perfectly. But what I would say about nature, I'll just use an analogy that I've heard before, and then I'll ruin the analogy, and then we'll build the analogy back. So suppose you have something like an acorn, right? An acorn is a seed, but that seed already contains within it all the potential to become the majestic oak tree, right? Its nature, its essence is to become what it is in its full maturity, right? Which is the oak tree, right? So nature, when it is sort of grown into its fullness or flourishing, it attains becomes what it really is. It is what it is. It's the essence of the thing, right? And so in thinking about this sort of analogy, the acorn reaches its nature in growing into the oak tree, right? Which is strong and does all is beautiful, provides shade. Okay. So that's all good. But we can think a little bit more about these acorns, because I don't know about you, but when I was a child, and maybe even not such a young child, I occasionally step on acorns because they make a really good crunching sound under your feet. Occasionally, I have seen arts and crafts made out of acorns. Occasionally, I've seen acorns eaten by squirrels, and squirreled away, quite literally. And occasionally I've seen saplings of oak trees destroyed by bad weather or by small children uprooting them, right? That is to say, if the nature, what we know from looking at an acorn is that as much as the nature of a thing is it becoming what it is, there are so many things that can get in the way of a particular seed reaching its perfection or nature or flourishing, right? And so the purpose of the education in the honors college is the cultivation of human nature, the nature of the soul, so that it can reach its maturity. Our goal is really rooted in the Catholic intellectual tradition, especially in the Benedictine tradition, is to make space for nature to flourish, so that grace can have something to work with here, right? And just to think about this a little further, right? What does that work or cultivation of education mean? Well, it means, I mean, if anyone has ever attempted to grow something, right, in the dirt, you know that there are at least two things that you need to do. And one of those things is you need to nourish the seed if it's going to become what it is, right? So that's one thing. You need to nourish the seed. And you also need to do the hard work of weeding your garden, right? You need to, that is, weed so as to remove the obstacles to flourishing, the flourishing of the seed, right? So you have to nourish and you have to remove obstacles. So how does uh, liberal education remove, um, well, nourish the soul? Well, it nourishes the soul by steeping the soul in the classical, the pre-modern tradition, which requires that we go back, just to think about reality, um, not just through philosophy, but also through poetry. It means we can nourish the soul when we encounter Aristotle's clear-sighted vision of reality, prior even to the gift of Christian revelation. We can relish the works of Homer and the beauty of his poetry and the way that sings of not so much, not even only the wrath of Achilles, but also of the beauty of the world and of our human longings for greatness. We can relish, at least in our curriculum here, we can relish the scriptures, the works of St. Augustine and the poetry of Shakespeare and Dante. Um, we also, and this is very unique and particular to the Honors College in which I teach, um, we very deliberately nourish our souls together by worshiping together, and affording our students with opportunities for prayer, but also for just friendship. We think friendship is so essential to a liberal education, being rooted and grounded not just in the love of God, but in the love of the community. And that means that we make an effort here to really engage our students through different women's and men's coffee hours once a week, through bonfires, through attending symphonies together. All of these are ways of nourishing the soul in light of the truth, in light of the various logoi that reflect the logos, who is Christ himself, right? When it comes to weeding the garden of the soul and sort of removing the obstacles to flourishing, we need to recognize that our contemporary culture, and I think this is probably no surprise to anyone this call, but our contemporary culture is saturated with bad philosophy that is reflected in superficial relativism, and ideology, right? And one of the things that we do in particular here in our curriculum is we engage with contemporary philosophy in a very serious way. And why do we do this? Well, we do this because when we see these errors in the context of a curriculum that presents the Christian and classical alternatives to modern ideology and its legion of problems, we are able to experience a deep liberation from the seeds of unexamined errors that inevitably lie in our souls, right? Because you cannot not be affected by the culture in which you live, right? And inevitably we all have different places where we don't see perfectly well, right? And so when we encounter very clear articulations of a falsehood, it's an opportunity for us to grow in recognition of what is true and to sort of repent of those places of falsehood, right? And not only this, but when our students encounter the most powerful and articulate forms of different seeds of secularism and anti-religion opinions and anti-classical arguments, when they encounter these opinions outside of our abbey walls, they're not really shaken because they've seen it all before, and they've seen it in the most impressive and articulate way that it can be seen. They are able, that is, to remain rooted and grounded in truth and in the reality of nature and of friendship. And all of this, I believe, is part of the long work of the monastic tradition, which is preserving the works of antiquity, in order to preserve the work of truth, right, in the world in so many different ways. So that is a bit about what our education is. And so what is a good student like? A student who seeks that kind of liberation from error and falsehood, and seeks to desire to grow in openness to that, right? What kind of student wishes to prepare their nature for grace, right? That I guess is the question, right? So there's a couple qualities that when I'm talking to students or interviewing them, or when my colleagues, Dr. Veracali and Dr. Wysocki, are talking to students, they look for. And so this is particular to the Honors College, but I think it's going to be particular to the school as a whole, and really just any serious college, right? I would say there's a certain discipline first. Second, I think there's a certain spirit. And there's thirdly a certain willingness to just leap and immerse oneself. So just first to speak to discipline. Speaking of those modern philosophers who are not exactly gentle friends of Christianity, there's a man named Friedrich Nietzsche who is someone who's a critic of Christianity, but there's one thing that he is willing to praise, at least, about Christianity, and it's something that I also think is good about Christianity, though for perhaps more reasons than Nietzsche does. Um, but Nietzsche, in one of his works, speaks about one of the profound contributions of Christianity and Aristotelian thought to the West. And that is summed up in his use of the phrase, long obedience in one direction. Long obedience in one direction. That is what this education, rooted and grounded in the Christian intellectual tradition, does, is it requires the discipline, the slow and steady labor of working through the texts, which are not always readily or easily enjoyable, right? And yet they are, with if we put in the work. And so that means that kind of discipline is the quiet habituation of the soul, that is ordered to and submits to a good greater than itself and greater than easy and fleeting pleasures and comfort. So there's a kind of discipline, an orderliness, a willingness to sit and read, and to forego other pleasures for the sake of this kind of education, because it is worth it, right? So there's that discipline of slowly and steadily going to work. I'll just say this, there's this beautiful story about scholars were doing research on medieval manuscripts from Benedictine monasteries of old. And they found these little marks in certain sentences at the end of different, in the middle of these works, and they couldn't figure out what they were. And so as they investigated, they realized that these were the interruptions. The monks would do their daily work, which was part of their way of life based on work and prayer. But when the bell rang for prayer, these monks would immediately put their pens down, right? So not only do they have the discipline to work in a slow and steady fashion that gives to us today the books that we have, they also submitted that work to a life of prayer, so that when it was time to pray, it was time to pray. When it was time to work, it was time to work. So that order, that balance, that discipline, those are all the kinds of things that make for a really excellent student. One of the other things we look for is a certain disposition of spirit. And I guess there are two parts of the soul that I, or not two parts of the soul, but there are two sort of qualities of spirit in particular that we look for. And this is something that draws on a professor at St. John's College, Eva Braun, who I really admire in one of her lectures. But I'll say what she said, but in light a little bit more of the Gospels. So there's a twofold quality of spirit that's needed for the student of liberal education. One is reverence and humility, right? A certain reverence before great authors, great texts, and great minds. The other is a stubborn willingness to question, right? A willingness to question. So on one hand, there's a certain reverence that we take into the study of authors who are probably smarter and more influential and more impressive than we are. But also, we're willing to question them, right? We're willing to question them. And so this seems like a paradox, both having a reverence for these things and also a willingness to question them. So to think about what that looks like, I would call to mind the Gospel of St. Luke. You remember early in the Gospel, there's the announcement of two miraculous births, one of John the Baptist announced to Zechariah, and one of Jesus Christ, the Word made flesh, to the Blessed Mother, right? Mary. So they both face a miracle, a miraculous birth, given a miraculous announcement on the part of an angel. And they both ask questions. But Zechariah has to sit in silence for about 9 months to ponder his answer and what he did wrong. And Mary somehow becomes worthy of holding within her womb the God himself, right? So the question becomes for us, well, how come they both ask questions, but one becomes the mother of God and the other has to shut up and think for about 9 months, right? Why is that? Well, we have to look at the content of their questions and the way they question, right? So for Zechariah, the question becomes the way that he phrases his question is, well, how shall I know? The angel says, there is going to be a miraculous birth. Your wife will conceive. And he says, yeah, right. How shall I know? The Blessed Mother, Mary, in return says, not how shall I know, but she says, how will this be? How will this be? So the question is, what's the difference between how shall I know and how will this be? How will it come to pass, right? And the answer is simply that one, Zechariah questions in a way that is totally devoid of the reverence and humility that would be fitting of his station. He makes himself the center of knowledge. And in a way, he makes himself, his mind, his perception, the measure of reality. It will be when I know it, right? And this is some of Socrates' students in his dialogues, Meno jumps to mind, are kind of like this. Can you tell me, Socrates? Right? And they start a question in that way. Prove it to me. And once you stop being 18 years old, you recognize maybe that's a silly way to start a conversation with someone who might know a little bit more about you, but it is nonetheless a possible posture that we can adopt, right? It's not an attractive posture for a teacher because it means that every class is going to be a headache and a wrestling match rather than a mystical encounter with the Word made flesh dwelling among the logoi, right? That we trace in everyday life. So in contrast, what is the way to ask questions modeled by Mary? Well, it is a way of questioning that says, not how shall I know, but how can this be? It says, this is. I don't question that. This is reality. This is nature. I'm not going to pretend I'm at the center of things, but to my understanding, nature works a certain way, and I don't see how this quite fits into the natural order of things. But if you say it is, it will be, and therefore my duty is to ask not how shall I know, but how can I conform my mind to reality? How does the student conform his or her mind to reality? And it's that spirit of questioning. When I don't understand, I don't assume that the question the problem is the teacher or the text or the world outside my head. I assume it's me, right? So in the same way that when I look at the world without my glasses or my contact lenses, that I don't assume that the world is blurry and broken and crooked. I just assume that my eyes are actually broken, right? And they are in need of correction. So it's that reverence for the text, and also a willing to question from that reverence. Well, how do I see better? How do I see more clearly? It's that kind of spirit that we look for, right? And then finally, I would say what makes for a good student. Well, it's this a willingness to dive in and get messy. Um, it is just this willingness to dive into the text, to the conversation, to dive into friendship and community events. It is a full-blown willingness to jump in and get messy, and really just to say it a little bit differently, a willingness to fall in love with these books and become devoted to questions beyond ourselves. Um, so that sort of is the heart of, I think, what a good student is, and what we're doing here. Like what is education? What is the kind of education we pursue, and what kind of student is a good student? Um, I'll just maybe in conclusion, and then open the floor to some practical questions. Say, um, what do I like about Belmont Abbey? In particular, why do I think this is a great place to be? I mean, I'm sure it's not for everyone. Like there are different schools for different people, and that's fine, right? But I can tell you why I love being here. I fell in love with this place when I was about 16 or 17. I came on a college visit then, and I found on these grounds, this is a school that was founded in 1876. We've been here a long time. We're really, for so long, that Belmont Abbey was the Catholic Church in North Carolina, so it's a very ecumenical institution. Um, we have been here. There's a certain way of life and order. The monks here who founded the college as their apostolate have a rule. They live by the rule of Saint Benedict, and one of their hallmarks is the virtue of stability, right? So the monks here, when they come here, they stay here. They stay here for life. They live, they work, and they die here. And one thing that to my mind is so special and speaks to that is that we have on the monastery's property a graveyard. It's one of those beautiful places on campus, but you can go and see from Abbot Leo Haid, who was the first abbot and actually the first Catholic bishop of North Carolina, to all the monks who have ever lived and been part of this community. They're still there, right? And there's a sense that this place lives and is the real deal. It lives and breathes a tradition which is older and more powerful and beyond all of us. And you can feel that, I think, in the community. You can feel it in the friendships. You can feel it in just the sense of peace and richness that comes here. I think Belmont Abbey falls in the same category of certain other Newman Guide or Christian classical schools. So just to speak about what is unique to us that I love. But besides all our rootedness in the Benedictine tradition, there's a I think that Benedictine tradition makes us a little bit practical. So for example, our tuition is, I think, 19,500. So we've tried to keep that as low as possible. And we give generous scholarships, particularly for our premier programs like the Honors College. That also speaks to, our school is quite diverse when it comes to religiously. And so while we are a Catholic institution, we have a kind of openness and welcoming that I think is very obvious and palpable. More and more we've drawn Orthodox students here. We've drawn different Protestant denominations here, and as far as I can tell, these students have been able to flourish here and establish their own communities, and that has actually led to really fantastic dialogue, particularly surrounding our Fathers of the Church class that we offer. So it's that kind of spirit of openness and dialogue that is just very genuine here because it's so rooted in a love of truth and a love of friendship. And there's a certain pragmatism here that because we have such different kinds of student, we have a lot of student athletes here as well. So if you like sports, it's a great school to sort of maintain your Catholic identity and also, or your Catholic and Christian identity, and to really pursue excellence in a particular sport. But what I would say is because we have such a diverse student body, it means that not everybody thinks the same thing you do or lives the same way you do. So this is a place where you will see, I think, this is not a city on a hill apart from the world. It is a way of learning how to live in the world while not being of the world, right? And to form deep and intimate friendships while not hiding, right? And I think in this way, we're not the Benedict option, we're just Benedictine, right? We're the Benedictine option. And I think that's what we are. One final thing for those of you who might be in high school is we offer summer programs for students every year. I really have a blast teaching at our Schola summer programs. They're a week long, and it's sort of, if you're curious about anything you've heard, if you're interested in reading great books together and just getting a feel for what life is like here, even in the midst of the heat of the summer. It's just a blast. That's in the middle of July. I forget the exact dates. I'll be teaching in it this summer, and it's a great week of, in the morning we read books and have seminars, and in the afternoons we go hiking or to the Whitewater Center to baseball games. And all of that is part of a robust, yeah. Oh, hello. Yeah, a robust community life. So that's all I have to say, and just open the floor to questions. Yeah. Matt, how do I, Dr. Bianco, what's the best way to go about this?
Yeah, so people, you guys can, those of you who want to ask questions of Dr. Bohr, you can post them in the chat box or unmute and just ask them over the microphone or whatever. Do you want me to kind of go through the chat box for you and ask the questions, or you just want to read them? And
That could be helpful. I'm not as practiced on Zoom as I should be. As I was better in 2020, but my tracks.
yeah, well, I'm glad you're forgetting because that means you're not on there as much. Okay, so where is this college is the first question.
We are just outside of Charlotte, North Carolina, in a little town called Belmont. Yeah.
And do you have a youth ministry program?
We have what is it called? Something in theology. I have a list of things here. In theology, we have a parish and pastoral ministries track. So it's not exactly youth ministries, but a lot of the people who go through there, they tend to be our youth ministers and types. Yeah. So we do have a track basically for that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Science. What is science like at the college?
Excellent. Well, I last I heard, we always have had an absurdly good placement in medical schools here. So our biology program is just fantastic, and a lot of our honors students are biology majors. Or even nursing majors. So that's fantastic. I think they've just started biochemistry, physics, mathematics. It is good and growing.
I'll go to the next question, but I think this is probably a spot where it's worth explaining how you can do the honors college and get a
Yeah.
like, or whatever.
Oh, this is, yeah. Thank you, Dr. Bianca. This is, yeah, one thing I should have said earlier is because of that pragmatism. Belmont Abbey is one of the few liberal arts intensive cores where you can also major in a different discipline or a vocation. vocational trade, right? So we have different tracks in the Honors College. We have a 75 credit track where you basically take your core through the Honors College and then have a major on top of that. And then we have great books majors at the 90 credit and 120 credit level, where you can sort of major and super major in the great books, depending on how immersive you want to get. So um, for not just at the school as a whole, but in the honors college in particular, you actually, it's one of the places where you can have it your cake and eat it too. You can do the great books things and also major in finance or education or um, biology or politics and economics. Just
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty great because it's not common to have the ability to have such
yeah.
robust,
I
a
think
robust kind of great books program and still be able to get a biology major or whatever, that's
yeah, it speaks to Aristotle speaks about living and living well, right? Well, in order to live well, you need to make a living, and I think we recognize that.
yeah, good. The next question is when are visiting times?
All the times, as far as I am aware. If you want to visit, the best place to reach out is to the admissions office. And I can give there's also, for the Honors College in particular, Dr. Tom Veracali is in charge of our recruitment and admissions on that end. So if you find yourself on our website, it's Dr. Thomas Veracali who is sort of at the helm of getting people into the honors college these days. But just setting up a visit is the best thing to do, is to go to through admissions on our website. Yeah.
If you do happen to email Dr. Veracali, it might be worth putting in the subject line that you attended this call through
Yeah.
CiRCE.
Yes, anything that says you like CiRCE tells us that you probably like Dr. Matt Bianco and we like Dr. Matt Bianco, so that means that we probably like you.
Thanks. Um, are all of the professors Catholic?
Um, it depends on the at Belmont Abbey or in the Honors College.
It doesn't say, so
Okay, yeah. I mean, no, actually, no. Yeah, I mean, there is a certain, I think, there's a number of us are Catholic, but there's quite a mix out there. Um, even even some non-religious. I think that I was just at a faculty. We have by a weekly faculty lunch, and I saw some of my colleagues there who I think are Hindu. Yeah, but they somehow work very well within the life of the Benedictine college. Yeah.
interesting. Yeah. What books would best prepare a high school student for a liberal college education?
Mm, that is a great question. Well, you could probably speak to this as well I could, but I am a big fan of the idea that um, spoken by a guy named John Senior, who founded a very similar program to ours back in the 70s out in Kansas. And his idea is that in order to be prepared to read the great books, you need to read really good books. So some of the best authors to read, and I know this is going to be hard, but some of those mentioned, C.S. Lewis, G.K. Chesterton, um, uh, Tolkien are fantastic preparations. So is Jane Austen. I actually get to teach her in the senior year of the curriculum. So we take good authors and even great authors seriously. Those kinds of novels, and I'm thinking. I mean, I think there's all kinds of paths, but I guess I would say that the best preparation I had for the art of conversation was Jane Austen, because she's so clever and witty, and she had just a way of she resonated with me. But I think it's not necessarily, I mean, the best way to prepare is not necessarily reading Aristotle's Metaphysics. That takes some work, and you should probably do that with a guide. But reading really good books that nourish your soul and just, I think that's really good. So really good novels, I would actually say. Feed your
I
mind.
would second every book you said, and then just say, and I would just add that, especially for you, you guys on this call, because you're all, teenagers or adults. You're never too old to read fables and fairy tales. Keep reading fables and fairy tales. Those would count. But like Lewis says, sometimes we go through this phase, right, where we feel like we grow, we're too old for them, and then we get older, and then we're not too old for them again. So
Right. Oh, that's so true. Oh, that's so true. Yeah.
let's see, how many students in a class?
Depends, but anywhere from 10 to 20, I would think. I think our student to faculty ratio is 16 to 1. And I think we aim to keep classes around 15. Sometimes there's a fluctuation in that, but that's about where it is. Yeah.
Any recommendations for high school students on how to prepare for a college like the Belmont Abbey Honors
I mean, reading really good books. I to prepare, I'm trying to think. I think a lot of you probably accidentally prepare, without knowing it. I think I was homeschooled through 8th grade, and I remember thinking that I was awfully sneaky when I would take extra long lunch breaks to read books, that weren't exactly scheduled. And I in retrospect, I'm pretty sure my mother encourage that subtly because it was the best kind of preparation, is learning how to love reading. And so I think, um, pursuing habits that make you a good student now, you should be able to do the practical things. Um, but I think any serious college is not looking for one-dimensional students who only read books. We also want to see students who play sports, who have healthy social lives, who can really look an adult in the eye, and hold a conversation. And I think that is what's impressive, is someone with a well-rounded character, um, who's comfortable and eager. Yeah.
I like
So
the story about the monks, the scribe monks, there's a time to work and there's a time to pray.
yeah,
The same thing can be applied, or can be said of us, but applied to all aspects of life, right? Like there's a time to work, there's a time to read, there's a time to pray, there's a time to go outside and just go for a walk. There's a time to do my chores. There's a time to uh, take care of myself, like shower and brush my teeth, and all of these things that we just have to do. And that being
yeah.
taught, I think, just even in all those little things goes a long way in what you would need to be able to do at college. Right?
Right. And I just think about, I mean, especially with this generation of students, who haven't lived in a world without an iPhone. I mean, kind of recognized this early on, and so I don't do this as much anymore, but occasionally getting a group of students together for a game of frisbee, and of course creaming them, because that play is part of a full and meaningful life. Yeah. Also, it's a display of character and excellence, and sometimes it's just fun to have your students trash talk you, respectfully.
Yeah, and suffer defeat at your hands. All of those little.
Correct. Yeah.
um, how big is the school?
It's about 1,600 now. There's I'm forgetting if there's some students who are in our online master's program, some in person, and some um, commuters, but I think it's about 1,600, maybe 1,500 residential students. So a lot of people bopping around, but not too many. We're basically the ideal Greek city. Not too big, not too small, just right.
Right. What percentage of the student population is Catholic?
Shoot, it's been a while since I've seen that statistic. As far as I'm aware, it's somewhere between 50 and 60%. So I think it's the majority, but not, it's a majority, but it's not like 99%. It's
Yeah.
close to 50 or 60. Yeah.
Do you require standardized tests for admission? And if you do you accept the CLT?
We're huge fans of the CLT. Yeah,
How do you
we
pose that question?
we love working with CLT. We are, let's see, I believe last I heard, we do not require testing. I think they dropped that during COVID for some reason. It is for the Honors College in particular highly encouraged because um, when we are deciding, for example, actually, I should have mentioned this at the beginning, but we offer 5 full tuition scholarships every year. And one of the things that sets our really excellent students apart is a really good um, test grade, frankly. It shows something. It doesn't, it's not everything. It's one factor, but it can, if you do really well, it can help set you apart and be considered for one of those 5 full tuition scholarships. Yeah.
Right. How big? Oh, good question. How big is the library and is there a cafe?
Yes, punnily enough, it is the cafe is named Holy Grounds. Um, you know, we have, in addition to the cafeteria, yes, we have Holy Grounds. And the library, I don't know the square footage. It's pretty big. It's well stocked and large and has a great collection of rare books in the bottom of the library. There's actually a really um, neat tradition of in the monastic archives that we have here, very unique to Belmont Abbey. Yeah.
You got a thank you from Grace. And then safety. How safe is this college?
Actually, very. Um, I mean, I'm sure, like, I think no place is perfectly safe, but last I heard, we were rated we had absurdly high safety ratings. Um, and I think there's been efforts to even improve that. We have some new security gates and some new initiatives by students to improve different things that they've noticed over the past years of being here. Um, I forget who rated us, but we were actually rated one of the safest college campuses. And we have a wonderful campus police force here. They know all of the students, know the people walking around, know the cars that aren't familiar, and they are just vigilant and well trained. They're mostly cops who were in bigger police forces, and this is their kind of easing out of the bigger police force. So they're very well trained men and women. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't, this may sound weird, and I know it's not impossible, but
Mhm.
I think it's very difficult to be engaged in criminal or really, really disrespectful, just crude behavior with the knowledge that monks are just walking around the campus. There's
Yes.
a huge basilica just kind of looming looming beside you. And it's kind of hard when there's this beautiful building and these wonderful monks walking around to do something really awful.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, human nature is what it is, and there's always the exception, but for the most part, it's a place where I feel really safe.
Yeah.
Um, and, um, and I've been around, yeah.
You got another thank you. This was very informative. And then, what are the science majors? Do you know? It's different
Um,
science.
yes, what do we have? We have biology is the biggest one, I think. We have chemistry, we have biochemistry. Um, we have, let me see, we have mathematics, it's not exactly science. And we have different tracks in psychology that are oriented towards um, we have a BS and a BA in psychology, and also a link to Divine Mercy University, which is where a lot of our students who want to go on to pursue PhDs and counseling go, because it's one of the sane programs in psychology out there. Yeah.
Okay, here's a good question. If there was only one thing you would want a student to glean from what you have presented today, what would it be?
Hmm.
You know, these
That
questions.
that we love Matt Bianco. Sorry. Uh, What is the one thing? See, I always think in threes because Aristotle always speaks in threes, and that's my corruption. But I guess if there were one thing, um, it would be that, yeah, you want to prepare your nature for grace. Yeah. And you want to find a place that will allow you to do that in the most complete way.
Nice.
Yeah.
I like that. Do you take transfer students with an associate's degree?
Yes. Yes. To the college as a whole, to the honors college. Yes. With sometimes we have to, usually it's a one-on-one conversation where we see what works and what doesn't. But yeah, we do.
I'll combine these two questions. What about the lighting outside and then safety for girls particularly?
Okay. Yeah. Um, the lighting is actually that's an interesting question. It's pretty good. I think there are places where it could be better. Um, and so I mean, for people who don't feel safe, there's always the option of we have such wonderful campus police. We can always, if there's a something that makes you feel unsafe, you call the police and they'll walk you back from the library to your dorm. So the lighting is in general really good. And I'm sure could be improved. But actually, I was thinking about this because I think one of our student body, our students in the student body are making that sort of their premier thing is making sure that the lighting is 100% safe. So um, I think different people have different experiences, but I feel very safe here. This is a very safe campus, very safe people. And yeah, yeah.
This might be the last question. Is there a dress code?
No. Um, Not particularly. In the honors college, there's a certain dress guidelines. Sweatpants are pretty much forbidden. Um, you want to dress respectfully, according to the class, but there's not a particular dress code here. Not like Christendom or places like that.
How many teachers? Another one just popped up. How many teachers are there? Let's say if it's 16 to 1 and there's 1,600 students.
It's about 100, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds right.
Great on this guy doing
Yeah,
math.
how about that? It gave you a good ratio. Yeah, that's about right. Yeah. Um, yeah, we just hired a lot of nursing faculty. So yeah, and a lot of people who sort of this is I'm up for tenure this year, and so they speak about tenure as sort of your the professor's version of the monastic vow of stability.
Hmm. Oh yeah, because you're kind of stuck there at that point, right?
I don't know if I don't stuck sounds so pejorative. I think it's more like
Kind of
you're
stable.
kind of like you're stuck in your marriage. No, you're married to your marriage, you know? Yeah, happy to be stuck. Yes.
In both directions, right? They get to keep you and you get to keep them.
Right. Right. Yeah, I mean, this is a place, frankly, I am so happy to be at every day. It is a great blessing to be here. And I mean, I'm hoping to join those monks in the cemetery someday, not soon, but eventually,
Somebody's asking how many buildings are there, and I think you can answer that question, but I just want to say that the campus is beautiful. Like the buildings that are there are, they're
You're gorgeous. Yeah.
gorgeous brick buildings. Um, they were, and they're made out of these bricks that the freshmen get to make, right? When you get their freshman year, you make a brick, and then that gets saved to be used in the next construction of new buildings.
I mean, it depends on the year. What I know is that the original buildings here, like Stowe Hall and the monastery, were constructed by the monks themselves, made out of those bricks. So now we have this brick making tradition that yeah, we make our own bricks freshman year, but the original buildings are made out of those bricks. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's cool.
It's super cool.
So this is get some good practical questions here. What is the most expensive thing in the cafe?
Hmm. I have no idea. I mean, I mean, they make a mean grilled chicken sandwich, I'll say that. It's not probably not the most expensive thing. I imagine it's some kind of shake. It
Yeah.
depends how many shots of espresso you put in that. Um, there's a lot of buildings, but there I would say one, two, three, four, five, six, seven. The heart of the campus is about 7 buildings, and then there's dorms and athletic things outside of that. But the heart of campus where you're walking around taking your classes is up and down Abbey Lane. We call it. It's this beautiful brick pathway. And yeah, it's 19,500 to come here. So yeah, I can, for those interested, I can put a link to a lot of questions in the chat. Um, yeah, so that'll answer a lot of like the practical questions for anyone who has those. Admissions also has a really helpful way of getting back to you on things that you might have questions about on the practical logistics side. Right.
Yeah. Very good. Last call for questions.
Mm.
Did you have anything you wanted to say in closing, or?
Um, What did I want to say in closing? Well, just I'm grateful for the opportunity to be here with you, Dr. Bianco, and to speak with all of you, and just to say for different schools or for different people, but for those of you who might be drawn here and want to learn more, you are most welcome here, and we would love to have you visit, to sit in on a class, to attend a school program. This is a really special place, and it is just one of the great joys of my life to be living in this community, studying these books with just some of the best students, and to do so in a place where I am. I'll just say this, I taught at secular and even other Christian institutions and state institutions before I came back here. Um, I am more free here to ask questions and to think than I was at any of those places. There is no censorship. The wokeness is out there, but it's not here. It is a place where you're allowed to ask sincere questions about what it means to love, what it means to be a human being, and where God fits into that picture. And I think that is just a uniquely rare opportunity in a world where higher education has just been utterly corrupted and is really has become morally bankrupt. And this is not that, whatever it is that we're doing here. Um, it is devoted to really this work of preparing nature for grace. Yeah.
Well, thank you. And I mean, I'm glad to hear you say that, because that's why we wanted to do this, right? Because there's the number of there's so many schools out there that have gone off the deep end, right? To be able to share and highlight the schools that haven't, or some of the schools that haven't. That's just a good. It's just a great opportunity that we have to do, and then for you to be here today and to share that and to speak to to them particularly about the school, but then especially about the being a good student, and the points you brought up were excellent. So thank you. There is another question on there. Do you pay for travel for the visits?
No, for our scholarship weekend, we pay for your stay and your meals that weekend. But for other weekends, that's part of the cost of college visits. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Well,
Well,
thank you
thank you.
so much. Thank you. Guys, have a wonderful rest of your day.
You too. Good evening.
Good evening. God bless.